This chapter is about the mirror modifier, and the mirror modifier is actually pretty versatile, so this is probably going to be a little bit longer than the usual modifiers. Let me start off by just adding a plane. If I add a mirror modifier to this plane here, you can see that it doesn't look very impressive, and actually it looks like nothing happened, and that is because the mirror modifier takes this little dot here and then uses the local object's axis as a mirror axis. So if I move this, you can see there is a shadow of this thing moving too, and if I go into solid mode, you can see that is working. So this here right now is producing a perfect copy of itself. If I press Ctrl R and insert an edge loop here, and then delete these vertices, you can see the mirror modifier in action. If I now grab any of these vertices, the action will be mirrored. Now I can go ahead and add another edge loop here, and now I can delete these two, and now I can include the y-axis in the mirror modifier as well. So now we have 1/4 of this plane being mirrored twice, and thereby completing the plane to its original size. Now let's have a look at some more options. For example, I can add an empty, and now I can use as a mirror object, I can use this empty, and this will override the mirror object center of your object. And if I now move the empty, you can see the two mirrored pieces, or actually the three mirrored pieces, move relative to the empty. Okay, so I'm going to delete this because this is rarely of a lot of use. What you can do to sort of simulate this effect is to go here and then Control-Shift-Alt-C and choose Origin to 3D Cursor. So this way you can also offset your mirror center, and if you want to do this by hand, you can go ahead and move this in edit mode. Now let's have a look at some of the very handy options here. You can use clipping, and this is something I usually do if I'm character modeling. It's a very good idea to use clipping, because if you now accidentally push something across the mirrored axis, it will be squished. So it will not move across the y-axis, and will also not move across the x-axis, because those two axes are enabled here. So clipping, very important thing. If you want to get your mirror object center back to this vertex again, you can press Shift-S, cursor to selected, go out of edit mode, Control-Shift-Alt-C, Origin to 3D Cursor, and everything is restored. So let's do something with this. Just insert an edge loop here, an edge loop here, move these two somewhere here, but first disable clipping, move them here, these two move here, and this one move in here. So we created something like a flower. And of course you can see every time I move a vertex, the 4 copies will do that mirrored. Now I have already unwrapped this, so if I go to textured view, you can see there is a petal on this blossom, and I have deliberately painted a red and a blue dot on it so we can distinguish between left and right. So right now what you can see is this gets mirrored, and of course since the entire tile gets mirrored, the texture gets mirrored as well. If we don't want that, we can check U, and you can see now the tile gets mirrored, but the texture is projected in the same way. If I check V as well, you can see the tile is mirrored, but the texture is not. And U, of course, refers to the local x-axis of the object, and V to the local y. So this sounds a little weird maybe at first, because if I turn off the U and V, then the texture gets mirrored, but you have to keep in mind that the entire object gets mirrored, thereby the texture gets mirrored, and if I mirror it again, the mirroring will be undone. So basically that's what it means to actually mirror the textures as well. Okay, good. Now let's add a subsurf modifier. Subsurf modifier, you can add it by pressing Ctrl 2, and if I turn off merge here, or if I put the subsurf on top, you can see there are little gaps here, and reason is, first my subsurf modifier is displacing the edges here, you can see those vertices basically don't exist anymore because the subsurf is overriding them and placing the replaced vertex over here. This means they are no longer close enough to get merged, and thereby the mirror modifier doesn't merge them. And if I enable merged and then put the subsurf below it, you can see that the mesh will be closed in this case, or adjacent vertices will be merged, and thereby the subsurf doesn't split them anymore. And of course you can set the merge limit. If this was slightly offset, you can just increase the merge limit until it's merged again, but usually the preset merge limit is fine. Just make sure that if you're using a mirror modifier, it's usually a good idea to have that one all the way on top, because otherwise the other modifiers might interfere with it. So let's have a look at the last setting, and that is vertex groups. And vertex groups is something that is not very intuitively, and it took me quite a while to figure it out, and actually it took me also one very helpful comment of a user. So let's just get into it. So for the explanation for the mirrored vertex groups, I have created this little man here, and I've also created an armature. And if I go into pose mode, I can see the names of the bones, and you can see this is arm.upper.r. And this is very important, that all your bones that are supposed to get mirrored, like the head should not get mirrored, but all the other ones have .r behind them, and that means for Blender right. So this little guy is actually looking into the screen. This is why this is R. And let's choose the character and then the armature and press Ctrl P. And then choose with automatic weights. And of course the little guy has a mirror modifier on it and a subsurf, and then as the last one the armature. If I now go into pose mode here and I rotate this, you can see the arm is doing fine, but the other side is not. I don't know the exact reason. I can just tell you Blender is sort of confused that after mirroring this little guy, something gets deformed and the result is a very uncontrolled deformation of the other side. So let's make that controlled. I'm going to delete the armature modifier, and this is not something I do for show. This is not a mistake I made. This is actually the original parenting to the armature was to create these groups here. I wanted all these groups with an automatic weight, and yeah, they still work. But now I'm going to select the armature, go in edit mode, and select all the bones that I want to mirror. And you can see my 3D cursor is right in the middle of my character, so I'll press period on the keyboard, then and press Shift D, and then S, X, and -1, and this will exactly mirror these bones. And you can see they now have the name .lower.r.001. If I press W, flip names, you can see this gets converted to L. So very handy. Now we have the same bones as here, except for they are not named .r, they are named .l. If I now select the character, shift select the armature, Ctrl P, with empty groups, it will leave the existing groups unchanged, but it will create empty groups for all the .l bones. And this now, if I go into pose mode and press comma to get into the normal object center pivot point again, I'll have to re-enable vertex groups, and now you can see the bones are deforming the individual part. This of course only works if the armature is below the mirror modifier, because otherwise the armature would deform it and then it gets mirrored. But other than that, if you have a fairly simple rig, you can now skip the part where you apply the mirror modifier, and that actually can save you a lot of time, especially if you go back in and have to remodel something. And also if you press apply, this will still work. So if you're weight painting a complex character, you'll only have to weight paint one side, and then add a mirror modifier, click on vertex groups and do the procedure that I just showed you, and then you are done weight painting by just painting one side. And let's just finish this little chapter with one quick tip. If I use box modeling, which I usually do, I create a box, create a loop cut, and delete all the vertices on the left hand side, and then I'll go and add a mirror modifier. If I now go into edit mode and extrude this to, I don't know, form a head or something like this, and I'll press Ctrl 2, you can see there's something weird going on. The reason for that is if I choose the entire face here and press extrude, you can see that this actually works. But if I don't use the face, but rather use all the vertices here in vertex select mode and I extrude, then an edge is created through the mesh, and that will mess up your subsurf modifier. So this is something you want to avoid, and you can see the solution is either extruding the face, but that only works if you have just one face. Once you have an edge loop through here, this won't work anymore. So what I usually do is I delete these vertices, in this case the edges, then extrude, and then with this make my way forward, and in the end I'll close this mesh again. And if you've accidentally done this, there is a fairly elegant method to get rid of these extra edges. I'll press Alt B, draw a box right around the center of the object, and that will clip your viewport. And now you can see here that all the faces are being shown, the ones that we don't want. So you can press B and box select them. Just make very sure that you only have those faces selected. Press X and choose faces. And if I now press Alt B, I deleted too many. That's a pity. Press Alt B again and then select this face select mode and then choose all these. X faces. Okay, so this is how you clean up your mesh. Alt B gets you back into the normal view, and you can see in my case there was still some stuff left, but in general this was a very quick way to get rid of those extra faces that mess up your subdivision surface modifier. That's it about the mirror modifier. I hope you learned something, and I hope I'll see you next time.